Most golf courses don't come with warning labels. Then again, most golf courses aren't Bethpage Black. Maybe you've been there or seen photos of the sign that hangs behind the first tee at the Black. Warning, it says, written in large red letters. It instructs that the course is extremely difficult and recommends it only for highly skilled golfers. This is sound advice. Bethpage Black is a procession of big, bruising holes bordered by massive bunkers and deep rough. And when it comes to par fours, it has some of the most ferocious you'll ever come across. If you can't hit it long and straight and consistent, this is not the place for you. Yet lurking amid all of this treachery is a hole not like the others. It's one that requires you to think, to shape the ball, to make decisions and use your brain. In other words, a hole of not just great beauty and challenge, but of great strategy. Hello, I'm Duncan, the architecture editor at GolfDigest, and this is an in-depth look at one of the smartest and stylish par 5s in the Northeast, the incredible fourth hole at Bethpage State Park's Black Course. The state park is located about 40 miles east of New York City and was created in the early 1930s by Robert Moses after the state purchased the 1,300-acre estate of railroad executive Benjamin Yoakum. At the time, it was reportedly the largest remaining privately held tract of land on Long Island. Moses was New York's controversial and dictatorial urban planner who for over 40 years held complete control over virtually every infrastructural program in the 5 boroughs, up the Hudson Valley, and out to Montauk on the tip of Long Island. Through force of will and twists of arms, he single-handedly reshaped travel and the way of life for mid-20th century New Yorkers through the construction of new bridges, tunnels, highways, state parks, and even playgrounds. Moses' big idea for Bethpage Park was radical for the era: transform it into an illustrious public golf mecca. There was already one golf course on the property, Lenox Hills Golf Course, designed by Devereux Emmett and opened in 1924. Once it was renovated, it became Bethpage's first course, now called The Green. The blue and red courses were added next, and they were finished in 1935. A year later, in the summer of 1936, the famed Black Course opened, a design currently ranked 38th on America's 100 Greatest Courses and one of the top 10 public golf courses in the country. The black, as well as the blue and the red, were designed by one of the great architects of the era, A.W. Tillinghast, along with Joseph Burbeck, the park superintendent who oversaw construction of all things at Bethpage. But let's put a pin in that for now. There's a lot to discuss about the design origins of these courses, which I'll get to shortly. The new courses were built during the height of the Great Depression using New Deal work relief labor programs, so Bethpage became a multi-year employment operator for workers in New York. At times, there were 600 men or more constructing the courses, along with the park's roads, trails, clubhouse, pavilions, and other structures. In very important ways, from the beginning, the Bethpage courses were by the people, for the people. When the Black hosted the U.S. Open in 2002, the first time the championship was ever held on a municipal course, it was affectionately dubbed the People's Open. New Yorkers loved it, and they let it be known, loudly, from the overflowing galleries. It was a perfect fit. Moses, Tillinghast, and Burbeck had big aspirations for the Black Course. It was the marquee attraction at Bethpage, the course with the biggest footprint and intended for the highest level of play. One writer described it as a course for giants. It was conceived in the image of Pine Valley, with intimidating Hades-sized exposures of sand and the majority of holes playing in isolation from one another. Tillinghast once wrote an article about it and the other Bethpage courses titled Man Killers. The land for the Black sits on some of the most robust of the 5 courses, including the yellow course added in 1956, with holes that stomp ruggedly up and downhill. The biggest movement on the course happens at our hole, the 4th, where the epic fairway climbs over 50 feet through a clearing of trees. It swings first to the left around a huge bunker, then swings to the right on the high side of another cavernous bunker. From there it curls back to the left toward a green that's blind and sits above 2 more deep bunkers. The effect of the 4th is one of ascension, like a mountain road switching back as it chugs uphill. The golfer's job is to keep it on the pavement and not veer off into the ravines, or in this case, the gaping bunkers. Most of the long holes at Bethpage Black offer few options for how to play them. Several doglegs like 5, 9, and 12 give long hitters the opportunity to cut drives over corner bunkers to shave yardage. But most of the others, especially the grueling march of holes at 10, 11, 13, 15, and 16 on the second 9 alone, are just long and straight and penal. They make you paint between the lines and torture you if drives wander into the sand or rough. The shape of the fourth, on the other hand, sets up more intriguing shot decisions. It stretches no more than 517 yards, so it's entirely reachable in 2 shots for most professional players. The key is still to get the ball in the fairway. Making birdie from any of the bunkers is unlikely. Knowing that, the best tactic is a right-to-left drive that covers the right edge of the first fairway bunker, meaning a carry of about 280 yards uphill. The fairway kicks to the left in this landing area, so there's a few extra yards to be had if a right-hander can turn it over. And really long hitters can try to push their tee shots all the way toward the end of the fairway, which cuts off at 340 yards. I can't believe I even have to quote that number, but the through distance is going to be a factor in some players' calculations. That's just where we are right now in the distance game. Obviously, if the professionals can get the ball anywhere in the fairway, they're going to be going for the green with the second shot directly over these 2 bunkers cut into the face of the hill. Rees Jones remodeled Bethpage Black prior to the 2002 US Open, and one of the things he did to the fourth was to take what was a large circular bunker beneath the green and restyle it into the current form, which is much more shapely. A few years later, he added the second bunker below and to the left of the original. He also removed a small bunker behind the green, lengthened the hole to its current distance, and extended and reshaped the 2 large fairway bunkers. Because Bethpage is operated by the state park system, it's subject to annual budgetary fluctuations, and the conditions of the course had been inconsistent over the course of its life. Until Jones's late 1990s remodel, there had never been any extra money for comprehensive renovations. In fact, the United States Golf Association kicked in $3 million to get it ready for the first Open. The cycles of natural wear and tear meant that the bunkers everywhere on the course evolved and eroded and changed through the decades. In the early years, there were more smaller fairway bunkers up the left side of number 4, much more like Pine Valley. At one point, the primary bunker on the left disintegrated into a collection of smaller traps. Jones's remodel, more than anything else on this hole, formalized these 2 great hazards into what we see today. In fact, all around the course, Jones rebuilt and reshaped the bunkers while pulling them closer to the center of the fairway, tightening the landing areas. His imprint is on the course almost as much as Tillinghast's and Burback's. Getting back to the approach shot, you can see the shape of the hole through the green looks designed for another draw. So, one way to play it, if you have the muscle, is draw, draw. But for elite players who are simply going to loft a 200 to 225 yard shot straight up into the air, it can be a straight ball, or they can work it whatever direction they choose, because the putting surface, though it's small, it's circular and doesn't favor one shot shape or the other. But let's step back and think about this hole from the perspective of us mortal players. It's much more interesting that way. As we've said, getting the ball in the fairway at Bethpage Black is more than half the key to survival. If we're able to drive the ball into this area of the fairway on the 4th, since we don't have that 280-yard carry in our bag, we're going to be faced with a risk-reward decision. This second large cross bunker is called the Glacier Bunker. It's a beautiful specimen that's angled across the face of the upper fairway, showing a long and imposing facade of sand. I mean, it looks like it's melting off the land. After we hit our drives, our choice then is how much of that bunker do we want to try to cut across? The more daring we are, the shorter the length of the third shot. But we have to be smart with the placement. The farther we can push the second shot up toward the neck, the better the angle is going to be into the green on the third, playing around that deep front bunker. But that brings the steep fall off on the right and through the fairway into play. The shot shaping then isn't a draw, but the opposite, a fade. We want to cut a shot over the Glacier Bunker that goes with the flow of the fairway. So what do we have then? It's a draw off the tee, then a fade to get into position for the third shot, working with the 2 movements of the land. This is the classic double dogleg that Tillinghast was so fond of and wrote about. You can see the similarities to the 4th hole in this old sketch. and also in the plasticine model he built of another conceptual hole. Now let's look at the green, because this is the real key to the fourth. The first thing you'll notice is the relatively small size, which means a precise approach is required from wherever it comes. More importantly, it's pretty flat, with no real significant internal contour beyond some subtle flow changes. Now, for those of you who know Tillinghast and the courses he designed throughout his career at places like Wingfoot, or Quaker Ridge in New York, Somerset Hills in New Jersey, or San Francisco Golf Club, it's a very peculiar and modest kind of green. Tillinghast's greens are usually some of the most evocative and robustly contoured in all of golf. The best are like sculptures that should be studied and sketched. He believed great courses were inseparable from interesting greens. The character of the putting green, he wrote, marks the quality of a course to a far greater extent than anything else. He believed that, quote, nothing can supply a green with more character than bold undulations. For him to design the kind of subdued, one-plane surfaces like the fourth hole, and like most of the other greens at Bethpage Black, it just seems out of character. We'll come back to why that might be in a minute, but the reason the fourth green is nevertheless effective is because it does one very consequential thing. It slopes away from the fairway, from front to back, fading into a low chipping area that Rees Jones added. This means that those long second shots that the pros hit from the lower fairway need to be hoisted high and with a tremendous amount of spin in order to hold it. Even then, even with probably a 6 or 7 or 8 iron in their hands, these approaches have about a 50-50 chance of releasing back off the green and down into that hollow. From there, the players are looking at a touchy pitch back up to the green for a one-putt birdie, with the possibility that the ball might roll back to their feet if they get too cute. The green slope is a simple but clever defense against low scores on a par 5, especially when the greens are stimping at 13 or so, as they do for major events at the Black. The green slope puts pressure on the rest of us too. Even though our third shots are shorter, they're also uphill and blind, and have to be struck with enough spin to hold the putting surface. That likely means we're flirting with the top of the bunker in front, landing it just over the edge. That's why it's so critical to try to push those second shots up into the neck to the right of the green, so we're coming at it more laterally, hitting more into the front to back tilt. On paper, the fourth should be one of the Black's easiest holes to score on, but doing so takes a combination of strategy, execution, and forethought. The hole's uncommon matrix of problems and possibilities stymied the field in the 2002 US Open, where the stroke average was actually a fraction of a shot above par, a stunning figure for just a 517-yard par 5. The scoring average dropped in both the 2009 Open and the 2019 PGA, but only a little, to 4.74 and 4.66 per round respectively, so still no pushover. The fourth plays a critical role in defining the Black course as one of the toughest tournament courses in the US by making players work really hard for birdies, harder than they want to on a par 5. Especially considering the course plays to a par of 70, and the other par 5, number 13, is a stout 608 yards. Number 4 should be the one breather on the course. It's not. The fourth and the rest of the Black design did what it was supposed to do during the '02 Open. Tiger Woods, the winner, was the only player to finish under par. The cut was plus 10, and the scoring average for the week was 74.9, almost 5 strokes over par. You have to go all the way back to the 1978 Open at Cherry Hills to find the last Open course that difficult in relation to par. The Black's tough, bruising design has always been considered an A.W. Tillinghast special, a final flex as the last course the architect designed before passing away in 1942, as new course construction had all but dried up by the late 1930s. But an alternative narrative came up prior to the '02 Open when the son of longtime Superintendent Joseph Burbeck insisted to GolfDigest that it was in fact his father who designed the course, not Tillinghast. According to the younger Burbeck, his family was always resentful his dad never received proper credit. What followed was a reanalysis of the historical record by a variety of writers and historians, initiated by GolfDigest's Ron Whitten, to try to determine the exact lineage of Bethpage Black's design. Based on the available information, namely the records of Robert Moses in New York State, first and second-hand newspaper reports, and books written after the fact, it became clear that Burbeck's role in the creation of the Bethpage courses was more important than previously realized. But the question of how much of the design of the blue, red, and black should be credited to Burbeck versus Tillinghast, if any, has remained something of a contentious mystery. Let me just say up front, we're not going to solve it here. We know that Moses hired Burbeck to oversee the construction of virtually everything at Bethpage, including the blue, red, and black courses. He actually lived on site and was there every day. Burbeck was the man. We also know that Moses hired Tillinghast as a quote-unquote consultant on the design of the 3 new courses, paying him a set fee for a maximum of 30 days' work. It would make total sense in 1933 to hire A.W. Tillinghast to design multiple courses on a single property. He'd done it before, as brilliantly as any architect ever has, at places nearby like Wingfoot and Baltusrol and Ridgewood. So it's logical to assume that it was he and not Burbeck, an architectural novice, who laid out the 3 courses, even if he was only getting paid for 30 days' work. The courses fit the land expertly, but no actual design plans have ever been found for the Bethpage courses from either Tilly or Burbeck. If found, the propriety of the Black's design would be settled immediately. And they must have existed, otherwise the hundreds of men who began working in 1933 wouldn't have known what to build. But we don't have them. It's also very curious that Tillinghast, a man of the written word who was a prolific essayist and who was acting as the editor of Golf Illustrated magazine at the time Bethpage was being built, didn't document or go into more contemporaneous detail about his design ideas, as he had at other jobs. Even though Bethpage was the largest project size-wise of his career, he wrote about it only a few times, sparingly, dusting over the top of it. Burbeck, for that matter, didn't write about it at all. Did Tillinghast design the 3 courses and then hand the plans over to Burbeck to build them? Or was Tillinghast a figurehead with Burbeck doing the designing and building in the background? One reason it seems plausible, at least to me, that Burbeck was more than just executing a set of plans is this: the black courses greens. It's difficult to imagine why Tillinghast would design such a relatively docile set of greens for a course that was conceived of as an ode to Pine Valley and in every other way bears such sharp teeth. We should expect his greens for the black to be as muscular and unapologetic as the rest of the course, like they consistently are at his best designs. So let's look at some of the possible scenarios for why this might be. 1. Tilly never drew detailed green designs. He routed the holes and situated the greens, but left them open to development and fine-tuning during construction. Perhaps green designs were never part of the understanding he had with Moses. Or perhaps because Bethpage was such a unique project with an entirely public clientele, severe greens might have been considered unwise for beginner players and pace of play. That caution, however, doesn't really jive with the black's length and massive sand hazards that would have been way more problematic to high handicap players in 1936 than heavily contoured greens that would have been running at 5 feet on today's stimp meter. Or 2. Tilly did design a set of green plans that we'd recognize as distinctly his own, but Burbeck toned down those contours in the final shaping. For reasons we wouldn't know but might include budget issues, drainage, wear and tear for a course that was going to receive heavy public play, or for something else, Burbeck deemed it wise to modify them. Tillinghast's contract was over by the spring of 1935, over a year before the Black opened, and he was traveling the country as a consultant for the PGA of America while the Black course was being finished. If this were the case, he wasn't around to object to the way the greens were being shaped. And if Burbeck was calling audibles in the field as impactful as determining the size and shape of the greens, it would be easy to understand why he thought he should be credited with more of the Black's design. Moving on. 3. The day laborers who constructed the Bethpage courses, who had little to no experience building golf courses, much less golf greens that require skill and precision and practice, weren't capable of executing anything beyond simple slopes and grades. Think about it. Bethpage was a massive and incredibly ambitious project that was being fast-tracked with dozens of moving parts. The entire complex was planned and finished in less than 3 years. In the name of time and practicality, artistic putting surfaces were a flourish just not in the cards. And lastly, 4. Tillinghast's original greens at Bethpage Black were something different than we see today. The greens at Bethpage have never undergone a thorough excavation and renovation. Who knows what we'd find if we stripped them down? Is all of this speculation? Yes, of course it is. We have no way of knowing if the greens were always intended to be modest or not. And in the end, it doesn't matter beyond academia who designed what at Bethpage Black. What got built is what we have today, a monumental course capable of handling both New York duffers who sleep in their cars to try to grab an early tee time, and also, occasionally, the best players on the planet. We can say that, however deeply Tillinghast was involved, and he was involved, what ultimately got built in 1936 might not have turned out the way it did if not for the day-to-day oversight of Joe Burbeck. That's why GolfDigest, and by now most others, credit the design of Bethpage Black to both A.W. Tillinghast and Joseph Burbeck. That said, we'll give the final word on the great fourth hole to Tillinghast. When he finally visited the finished course a year after it opened, he wrote this about the fourth. In locating and designing the green, which can only be gained by a most precise approach from the right, I must confess that I was a trifle scared myself when I looked back and regarded the hazardous route that must be taken by a stinging second shot to get into position to attack this green. Though he talks about locating and designing the green, he seems almost in awe of the hole, surprised by the architecture and the complexity. And yet, as surprised as he seems, the Black's fourth is the essence of his own beloved double dogleg par 5. It's formidable, though short. Penal, yet strategic. It warns caution, yet demands a bold, stinging attack. If Tillinghast admits being a little afraid of it, well, that's part and parcel for everything at Bethpage Black. The warning sign on the first tee isn't there for nothing. Thank you for watching this video. If there are other great holes you'd like to see us break down, please let us know in the comments below.